what everyone should want is a book that sells for a long time. And I think sometimes when we get caught up in publishing a book, it's how do I make this a bestseller right away? How do I, sell thousands of copies in my first week? And that's a sort of short-sighted way to look at the publishing process. And my role sort of segued from PR into digital marketing launches at the time that publishing sort of said, okay, social media is this thing now, right? Email lists are a thing now. How do we meet those standards? And so a lot of the PR roles started to transition into digital marketing roles. Like, how can we reach the most people through these somewhat organic channels that authors have created? So I spent a long time doing big digital marketing launches for New York Times bestselling authors and first-time authors. So really learning how to communicate that goal differently to two different types of people at different parts of their journey. And then ultimately began working in acquisitions in tandem with that role. And that was really cool because now I got to meet with agents and authors and read many, many book proposals and help decide what we would buy and publish. So I got to use all my former hats from PR and media to digital marketing and social media and all of that to determine what would be the most marketable buy for the publisher. So that's what makes my job now so incredibly fun because I get to use all of that former experience to help craft things from the ground up.
Yeah, I can see that firsthand, obviously, as a client of just, and I love too that how much your background plays into what you do now, because as you have taught me so much about that nowadays, writing your own book, wanting to go the traditional publishing route, it's not this like fairy tale story that I think people like myself dreamed of, that like, my book would just like show up in Barnes and Noble and everyone would be celebrating it. And so there's a lot of legwork on our own end for marketing the book. And so I can just see how much, that would help with what you do and how much like realistic advice you bring to the table.
Thank you. I mean, and everyone should want is a book that sells for a long time. And I think sometimes when we get caught up in publishing a book, it's how do I make this a bestseller right away? How do I, sell thousands of copies in my first week? And that's a sort of short-sighted way to look at the publishing process. I mean, a book is this concrete thing, right? We're holding it in our hands. It's not easy to reproduce. You're printing thousands and thousands of copies. And of course, there's ebooks and audiobooks, which take a lot of production. So the goal is always like, how can I create a book that's going to sell well long-term and sell consistently? So part of that is that marketing lens of how do we get that flash and how do we create something that's sustainable?
What do you think distinguishes a book that would sell for a long time? What like ingredients does a book like that need?
Yeah, I mean, usually tackling the things that are plaguing everybody all the time. Right.
The Me Too factor of like people just being like, oh, me too. Or like, you're in my mind, you're in my head. I think, I don't know if you find it like, if it's helpful, but when, people on your email list or whatever, write back and will say like, it's like, you're in my head. It's always those topics I tried to think about. Like, obviously that's what's connecting with people.
Yeah. And it's a lot of the emotional components. So when I think about sort of flash books that will sell quickly, but for a short amount of time, they're things like fad diets or, the next great cookbook genre or something like Instant Pot, things like that have like a great kick at the beginning. And then they're going to slow down naturally when the next great thing happens. But when we talk about human emotion and the human experience, that is forever. So, and it's proven to me all the time when I just show up more vulnerably on my social media too. Last night, I did a post about feeling really conflicted as someone who runs a business and is a mom. And my son is sick, and I felt guilty for having to move things around my schedule. And my final line was, we have to remember we're more than the work that we do. And the comments were blowing up with people going, this was me today. I needed to hear this. And those are the tidbits that create a good book. Like, how can you get people jumping in and going, this is me. I needed this. This sounds exactly like me. I see myself in your book, in your story.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking when you said that. Is like in every good copywriting course, class, whatever that you take, it's like everything, I always think of anything that I write as a mirror for other people, or a mirror, as my dad would say, but a mirror for other people that, that they're seeing themselves in it. At the end of the day, let's just be real. When people read stuff, they're thinking like the what's in it for me factor. And so
Completely.
yeah. So I think we all get like real excited about telling our stories in a book, like, oh, I've had this story of me my whole life. But it's like, yeah, but the point is it has to be helpful to other people and it has to like reflect back to them. But yeah.
100%. That's like a reflex for me now when I'm talking people through their book process. It's like, this is so good. I love this story about your life. And how do we show up in the teacher seat? How do we now turn the camera and bring the reader into the fold and help them have that reflection or look at that experience? But you're right. When people read story, their anecdotal story or personal story, they're often substituting in their own experience into that. So when people ask me, how much do I need to share in my book? Like, how vulnerable do I need to be? How open do I need to be? Only as much as you're comfortable with, and only as much as they need to get the point and see themselves in that story. So you're right. We're all just thinking about ourselves.
It is true. I mean, it's just the way the human psyche works. But I mean, the people who were reading your post last night were probably like, oh, thank God I'm not alone. Like, I'm not the only person who feels this conflict and this guilt and this pull to want to be both a business owner and an entrepreneur and a great mom. And then feeling like you're not doing either that great sometimes because you're being pulled, so people can really relate to that. And people don't want to feel alone, period, end of story. Like, that's just like,
that's the whole point of creating a great book, right? Like let's just know that we're all in this together.